Okay, the meeting will come to order. Good evening, everybody. Ms. Watkins, will you please call the roll?
Dr. Miller,
Here.
Ms. O'Connor,
Here.
Mr. Weiss, Ms. Johnson,
Here.
Mr. Davenport,
Here.
Mr. Patterson,
Here.
Mr. Crude.
Thank you very much. The next item of business is the approval of the agenda. It's been distributed. Are there any corrections to it?
I move that we approve the approve the agenda for the August 17th meeting tonight.
Okay. Mr. Patterson has moved to adopt the agenda. Do I have a second? Mr. Weiss is seconded, approving the agenda. By voice acclamation, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you very much. The next item of business is the minutes. The minutes have likewise been adopted. Are there any additions, any revisions to them?
I move they be approved.
Mr. Weiss has made a motion that the minutes be adopted. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Mr. Patterson has seconded by voice acclamation. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Our next item of business is public participation. Ms. Watkins, has anyone signed up to speak?
No one has signed up tonight, Dr. Miller.
All right, thank you very much. Our next item of business then is we have a staff report. Mr. Pambit, would you please highlight the staff report or provide any amplifying information?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The monthly departmental report was distributed to you in your packet. Again, that's just the customary information that I provide to the town manager, and it is a fairly, I'd say that it highlights a lot of the major items that have been going on in the community development department. With that being said, I did want to thank the commission for its attention to the information that we put out. The reason why I know that you guys are reading the packets and the information is that you guys are calling me with questions and that kind of thing. So I just, again, wanted to make sure that you all knew that we appreciate your attention to, to that information. One piece of information that I would like to state here, and just take this opportunity as long as I've got the cameras on me, is to state that we've got some things going on out at the Farmville Regional Airport. Now, again, the regional airport is not under the Planning Commission's purview, but it is under the Community Development's purview. Now, we did put out some information earlier in the summer that we were going to be closing the airport for 45 days. As you know, that's also been in the monthly report for the past 5 months. But one of the things that I wanted to clarify about the runway and taxiway closure for any pilots that might be listening is that while the runway and the taxiway are closed, the apron is still open. So what that means is we will still accept rotorcraft and helicopters to come to the airport as long as they approach from the east and as long as they depart to the east. The reason for that being is we've got a lot of work crews out on site, and pilots shall not fly over any work areas below a certain altitude. But that has been a notice has been issued to the FAA, and for any pilots that are listening, we will be updating our weather station to include that information. But the reason why I'm saying that here in the Planning Commission meeting is because this is one opportunity for us to push that message out. So we use social media. We also have sent memos to the hangar owners. One of the other things that we have also done that hadn't been done before is that we've sent out a contact list sheet for people to fill out and to send back to us. If anybody is interested in receiving updates, please contact us here at the Community Development Office.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Is there access to the hangars at this point? I know someone who keeps a truck in a hangar, and he was wondering if there was access to get his truck out of the hangar?
Yes, ma'am, absolutely. So there is access to the hangars. Only the taxiway and the runway are closed. So the apron, again, is how that hangar tenant would access the hangars or, their building. And they can do so freely, and as long as they do so safely, stay out of the way of the work crews, stay out of the way of any aircraft. Of course, as aircraft owners, they probably know that, but the apron is open to receive helicopters. No airplanes. We want helicopters to stop by and to buy our fuel and to refuel and to rest if they need to. The terminal buildings are still open. The older terminal building, again, is open 24/7 for any people who need to use that as they're flying overnight.
Thanks.
Finally, the Board of Zoning Appeals is not scheduled to meet in August. They did meet last month, and they denied a variance. So that concludes the staff updates.
Speaking of zoning, I understand that Ashley Atkins has passed some exams recently?
That is correct. So on Monday, the Board of Zoning Appeals, the Certified Board of Zoning Appeals course through VCU conducted its closing session. And we actually have two people from Farmville who were taking that class. Number one was the vice chair of the Board of Zoning Appeals, Penny Parrott, and then also our GIS and grants manager, Ashley Atkins Austin. So congratulations to them both for completing that. As you know, there is a companion course for planning commissioners. So if you have not done that course, again, just pushing out the message to the planning commissioners and to any BZA members who might be listening, contact Michelle and we'll take care of everything. There's budget for that, there's funding for that, and it is a stated goal of the town council that members of the planning commission and the BZA attend and successfully complete this course.
Well, congratulations to Ms. Austin and Ms. Parrott. That's terrific news, and I appreciate all the hard work and due diligence y'all have done for the sake of professional development and for encouraging us to do that as well. Thank you. Okay, our next item of business is old business, and I think for the first time in a very, very long memory, the town council chose not to accept our recommendations. Mr. Pamba, would you please share with us, or just kind of amplify upon your memorandum about ZTA 22 TAC 001 and 002?
Yes, sir. So just updating you on the status of these two zoning ordinance amendments or zoning text amendments. That's where the prefix ZTA comes from. But the first one is about the heights. So if you recall, a couple of months ago, the Planning Commission had a public hearing on additional height requirements for certain, shall we say, unoccupied architectural features like rooftop mechanical equipment, belfries, cupolas, elevator penthouses, things of that sort. So also included in that zoning text amendment was a provision for the maximum height of flagpoles. There was some discussion at the council level about the 20-foot maximum height townwide. So in the addendum, you saw where the staff had suggested some possible adjustments, but that's going to have to come back to the Planning Commission at some point for a public hearing so that it can further deliberate and discuss that. And then again, we'd have to re-advertise another public hearing, send that back up to the town council. But they did want the Planning Commission to take another look at the maximum heights of the flagpoles. So maybe we have another discussion at some point on that.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay.
And I think but just to be kind of clear too, that the sign thing, that's going to be split out and going to be handled by council without our input.
So the second zoning text amendment was with regards to the signs. As if you recall, the staff had packaged that up together for the B2 and B3 regulations, which there were no issues at the council level and there were no issues at the planning commission level. As part of that original package back in June, when the planning commission first heard it, political and campaign signs were also included in that, and there was some discussion at this level where the timing of when you could put signs out was still under deliberation, so the planning commission held that back. The town council did not deliberate on that because there was no recommendation from the council to discuss. But as far as the B2 and B3 regulations, the just one, I guess, intricacy in how that was packaged to the town council, there was one ordinance that was written for both zoning text amendments for the heights and the portion of the signs that they did receive. So because they referred one back, they couldn't pass the other one. So they will hold a public hearing on that in September. But by all accounts, the recommendation from the Planning Commission, there wasn't anything wrong with that recommendation. They basically had no discussion on that. They certainly agreed with the relaxation of certain maximums in terms of number of signs, sign area, sign height, that kind of thing. So instead of this month, they'll take that up again next month, and that should pass. So at some point, the Planning Commission will have public hearings on both of these items. As you know, we've got some pretty heavy stuff that we're trying to get done over the next couple of months with the Moat Museum. The town manager, Dr. Davis, the vice chairman, Mr. Patterson, and then also Dr. Miller, we all sat down in a meeting last week to try to figure out the sequencing of events over the next few months with regards to everything that's going on and how that impacts the workload of the staff and the Planning Commission. So bottom line, for these two zoning text amendments, you'll see them again in some form or another.
So just to clarify, we will also see 002 again?
You'll see 002 as it relates to political and campaign signs.
Okay, political and campaign signs, okay. But as Mr. Panvid mentioned, given the lift involved with the Moat Overlay District, and given there's at least one more project coming through that's going to require a conditional use permit and a hearing, I think it might be prudent to kind of hold off on the flagpole, cupola, and the political campaign signs for a couple months. Are you all comfortable with that?
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if it matters to me whether it's 1 month or 2 months or 3, but I do have a question or a suggestion about it. And I wasn't on the Planning Commission when the Planning Commission dealt with this, but you may remember I was out there and had a couple questions and comments. I wonder if one of the sort of an easy, sensible solution on this height issue with 001 is to have a carve-out for those in the town, not to accept the town from its own regulation, but rather to just say anybody who wants a higher height, file a conditional use permit for a higher height. The town zoning ordinance is full of situations that allow for a conditional use permit. And so I just throw this out for staff's consideration. I know we're not getting into it now, but because the topic came up now, I just want to throw that out for consideration. Is that one way to deal with whether the town needs something higher or a citizen needs something higher than 20 feet, just to have a conditional use permit escape valve for that. Like I say, is present in so many other places in the zoning ordinance now. So just, again, for the staff's consideration, you don't need to debate or discuss.
Sure. I will mention that the 20 feet came from a comparison with what Prince Edward County had done with their ordinance that they had just recently passed. Having read the entire ordinance, I also read that the county has put that clause in there that would allow someone to come in for a special use permit, as they call it in the county, for something taller than 20 feet. But it's my understanding that the maximum height countywide is 20 feet unless you apply for an SUP.
In some zones.
In some zones, right.
There's no height requirement at all. Like agriculture, I don't think has one. And by the way, I'm now on the county planning commission as of a week ago. And thank you. I'm collecting a whole set. And so part of this is because my familiarity with what the county did, but I think just having, a provision that allows for special circumstances.
And I think that when we circle back to that and have that discussion, we can certainly throw that in the hopper and see what comes out. Right.
So then people are comfortable, given that there are some kind of variables we can talk about, and given that, staff does need to go back and take a look at this, again, so people are comfortable coming back to this at a later date versus right away.
Yeah, do either one of them have any pressing, other than the one that we understand about signs, pressing immediate need to speed this along?
Not by any information that I've been given by the town manager. As a matter of fact, we all had agreed last week that it would be fine to take the foot off the gas pedal with regards to heights and political campaign signs. What we really need to press forward on is the Moat Museum. Now, out of both of these zoning text amendments, it's the B2 and the B3 provisions that we really need to get through so that I can provide some answers to some folks who are waiting. And I should be able to get those answers hopefully next month after the council makes its decision. I should also add, as I mentioned in the addendum, that what we're doing with the B2 and B3 regulations, we need to take another look at the B1 regulations here downtown. So we have been getting some inquiries about the maximum sign area downtown. So expect, as I mentioned in the addendum, some information on how to proceed on that, but that won't be for several months yet.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, sir. Next item of business is new business, and we are returning to the Moat Museum Gateway Overlay update. The minutes from the last meeting reflect that everyone was briefed on that, as well as the what an overlay is. Mr. Patterson, do you have any updates from any discussions or meetings you've had?
Yeah, the only thing I would add as we prepare to delve into the discussion, there will be a community meeting that will take place on September 8th at 6 p.m. at the Moat Museum. It will be fashioned in a open house format. It will have a bit of presentation at the beginning from museum staff and town staff. So the idea is to provide community as much opportunity as we can to have engagement in the process as it moves forward. This will be in addition to the required engagement processes such as the public hearings that will be deployed. Additionally, I would add that there has, the process of engaging individuals within the buffer zone is certainly underway. And, that will continue in addition to the required outreach that the town of Farmville will offer as it relates to this process as well. But I would say that is all that I have to add that is new from our last meeting.
Thank you, sir. And the meeting is listed on page 1 of the staff report, Moat Museum Gateway Overlay Update number 2. Again, it's Thursday, September 8th at 6 p.m. jointly held by the museum and by the town. And please come if you're available. It's a chance to share information, but also receive feedback from the community as well as we deliberate on this. So we have in front of us the latest draft, and I want to emphasize that these are drafts of the overlay district, the boundaries themselves, but also the language of the ordinance itself. And again, I want to emphasize this is just a starting point. It is a working draft. And as we consider these things this evening, I'd like for us to keep two different sets of things in mind. One, we're beginning our conversation about this tonight, and I'd like for us to think about and doing it for a couple different purposes. One, for the benefit of staff as they make their revisions, as they kind of begin to develop this and revise it, but also to make sure to do our own due diligence to give assurance to the public and as well to council that we're considering this very carefully and very intentionally. So that's kind of the purpose of this discussion this evening. As we're looking over these things, I would like for us to have a few criteria in mind as we discuss it, as we ask our questions, as we make suggestions. Those criteria are kind of fourfold. The first is, does not just the boundaries of the district, but the ordinance language, does it accomplish what we want? Does it accomplish what the comprehensive plan imagined this to be? Does it serve the purpose that the plan and that we imagine it? Second, is it fair to property owners, both as applicants, as they're going through, and if they want to make changes to their property, does this spell this out very clearly and consistently? Likewise, is it fair to property owners in terms of their ability to enjoy their property, to make the full use of their property as they're allowed within the zoning regulations? And then the third thing, the third criteria, does it meet the expectations of Georgia State University and the World Heritage Program? And Mr. Patterson, Mr. Pamby, you kind of probably know that best given y'all's meetings with those folks. And so as we just kind of orient our minds along those criteria, please. Likewise, because this is just kind of a working document, and there are some things that Mr. Pam had highlighted that he does want to focus our attention on, namely the procedures for reviewing the work and who's going to be responsible for that. Likewise, the appeals process and who's involved with that. And the big thing is, the commercial, the commercial criteria, the development for criteria, for commercial development. That's kind of blank right now. So I'd like for us to devote most of our attention to doing that. I'm not discouraging anybody from asking, thoughtful and detailed and intentional questions. Well, let's kind of operate at a higher level, and ask those kind of big questions versus, wordsmith and stuff right now. Is everyone comfortable with that? In the interest of kind of getting to what we need to discuss so we can present something on the 8th and also to council as well. Okay. Mr. Payment, do you want to go ahead and just kind of highlight, and I think what we'll do is we'll kind of go down through this paragraph by paragraph, A and B, and if people have questions about things or want to know more information, or if you have questions that we need to think about, Mr. Pambid, we'll do that. But before we start going down paragraph by paragraph, is there anything that you would like to share with us or you want to brief us on?
Yes, sir. Let me go through just a couple of slides, and then there's going to be a cue in the slides where we talk about specific provisions, and I think that would be our cue to kind of proceed as you had just mentioned in terms of going down each provision and just trying to get some impressions from the Planning Commission, some comments from the Planning Commission. But I do have several slides, and I'll try to get through them as briefly as possible. But much like Cam's comments from earlier tonight and even from the past couple of months, what I want to try to do with these slides is to, and again, much like your criteria, try to frame in a more technical standpoint what we're kind of expecting out of tonight. So again, tonight's intent the staff wants to present or achieve the following. Three basic things. Number one, more specific district boundaries, which we will be showing you here in just a minute, some data about the district. Number two, again, you've got the draft ordinance in front of you, and we do want to get some comments on some major themes, which we have a slide on, and as you had mentioned, Dr. Miller, some specific provisions. And finally, and this will come at the very end when I talk about the schedule moving forward, we want to get some comments from you on the community engagement approach and the timeline for the review and decision on this amendment. So again, here we are in August. We've actually been kind of considering this over the past couple of months. We have a target deadline of November to get this thing done. Moving forward, again, for those, so you guys have already received the little technical circular or the brief on what an overlay district is, but for the folks who are listening and watching the stream, what is an overlay district? So it is a type of zoning district that establishes additional regulations for various purposes, and this does not supplant the existing zoning of your property, so it does keep the underlying zoning classification intact. Perfect example, we're here in downtown Farmville. Downtown is zoned B1, downtown commercial or downtown business district. Now, with that being said, there are some portions of downtown that are in the floodplain. So we have a floodplain overlay that applies to those properties, and there are, quite frankly, a lot of other regulations that they have to comply with, and that would also, not just for existing buildings, but for new buildings. What are other examples of an overlay district? One of the more widely known examples are your historic and architectural districts. Farmville, while it has a district that's listed on the Federal Register of Historic Places or the National Register of Historic Places, we don't have anything in the zoning ordinance for that. Entrance corridors, so if the town ever wanted to really punch up its gateways into town, at the commercial, at the commercial entrances, then there are some possibilities there. Not that I'm suggesting that here, but just as an example of what an overlay is. Something that we've been dealing with a lot recently: airport safety and approaches. There are also some agriculture and forest districts that are possibilities as overlay districts. Tourism and business incentive districts are another one. And again, the aforementioned floodplain overlay, the technical term is the special flood hazard area. And then for those places around the coast, they also have some coastal zones or some coastal overlay zoning. So that's just a really brief example or several examples and an explanation of what an overlay district is. So the zoning of the properties at the on and around the Moat Museum area, they will continue to be zoned things like R3 or B1, B2, what have you, but there will be a gateway overlay basically on top of that. Getting into the district, so this is a map that you've seen over the last couple of months that show you what the proposed districts were from Georgia State. I will mention that Georgia State looked at these boundaries without the benefit of parcel lines, and I've actually had Ashley go in and approximate this map except using parcel lines. So that would be the appropriate way to do it, but I do appreciate what Georgia State has done in giving us a basis to work off of moving forward. So moving on from my cartoon map to Ashley's beautiful maps, this is basically a case style map that is based off of the parcel lines. So you can kind of see the difference between a general location, And now we're getting a little bit more specific that takes parcel lines into account. So to the north, you'll see a little bit of extension to the north, but on this map here, which was again a direct representation of what Georgia State had given us, especially along that northern edge, it just cuts straight across. Well, the parcel lines don't do that. This is what the parcel lines do. So, so it took the Georgia State recommendation, just basically drew a line and essentially extended a line from Irving Street all the way to South Main. So as you can see, the parcel lines don't really do that. And if the Georgia State line basically touched a parcel, then we included the entirety of that parcel. So that's why you see a little bit more to the north. We'll mention that that is Longwood property. Same map with the aerial data shown so that you have a little bit more context and orientation on where the lines actually are. So they do cut through some what we tried to do was we tried to avoid, you know, just straight cut through parking lots and that kind of thing, and actually use parcel lines that would be more definable. This is the zoning map with that same boundary. So what you can see here is really most of the district is actually zoned B2, and then of course to the west you've got just a few, just a smattering of properties that are zoned residential. So really you've got some. I should also add that you've got some what would probably be considered non-conforming houses along the east line of Griffin that are zoned, well, actually they're zoned R3, so disregard that. I started to say that they're zoned B2, but those are two different shades of purple or magenta or whatever. So you do have some R1, which is a lower density, and then you have some R3, which is a higher density. But the bottom line is that you only have a handful of houses that are impacted by this. Mostly, we're going to be talking about some business zoning, business zoned properties. Some of the district data that Ashley had pulled together, a total of 53 taxable parcels. There are actually 52 lots, and then there's one building that's kind of taxed like a condominium. So that's what the one building is. There are 43 addressed structures within the proposed district, and of course you see the breakdown on your screen about what the general land uses are for those different parcels. I'm going to pause just for a second and ask if there are any questions about what I've explained so far.
I think the new lines make a lot more sense than the Georgia State lines.
Right.
From the last discussion, I think this is a big improvement.
I will mention though, and I mentioned this last month and in previous discussions about the parcel lines, is the intent was to keep the district as compact as possible and to impact as few properties as possible. So again, what are we looking at in drawing boundaries? Certainly properties that are within eyesight of the Moat Museum or have some sort of historical or cultural connection to them, which I think that we do have a couple of houses, residential structures on Griffin Boulevard, so that's why you see some of those houses taken in. Likewise, that's why you see that chunk of houses on Hill Street excluded. So it doesn't, so if you're going to, as I mentioned last month, draw district boundaries, you need to really consider both sides of the street when you're really looking at drawing this kind of thing. So moving back forward to the district data, no questions there. And let me just go ahead and get into the major themes. So three things that I've actually discussed with Dr. Miller. Some of the things that we want to try to get your input on, the design guidelines, which are actually at the end of that attachment that you sent. Again, design guidelines, they're intended to inform the applicant to inform applicant design is also staff review. We can do the design guidelines in-house, and they can be adopted later. So the design guidelines are separate from the design standards in the zoning ordinance, which is what attachment B is. Design guidelines are more of a visual guide to what that is supposed to look like. A big one for me, or big one for the staff, review and decision authority. So when you go in and we're looking at the language, you'll see some blanks, and I'll just go ahead and just explain a little bit about what that means. There's one provision in here that says the blank, after consulting with the blank, shall consider an application and make a decision within 30 days of submission. That could be staff, could be town manager, it could be a review board of some kind, which we are strongly recommending that we not create a new board and try to stand up a new board. We would need people to staff that, or rather to be on it, rather. Community development would be the staff to it, but people such as yourselves who are citizen leaders who are appointed by the council to do that. What we don't want to do is to create another, historic review board or architecture review board or something like that. We are suggesting an administrative process that is handled by the staff, and if it needs to be reviewed by the planning commission or the town council, then the option can be written in to do that. The appeals process is currently written to go through the council. Now, this next slide is, this is my scribbling on the dry erase board that I didn't want to put into an electronic format because it's just so fluid right now.
So the Marines are responsible for everything, it looks like.
The Marines are responsible for everything that happens in the Community Development Office. That's correct. Semper Fi. So anyway, yeah, we've got a magnetic dry erase board. What you don't see are the Longwood magnets and the VCU magnets and the Final Four magnets and all that good stuff. So anyway, looking at the process going from left to right, someone submits an application for a certificate of appropriateness. That's what COA means. That's not a Farmville term. That is an industry term. So certificates of appropriateness are, it's basically like a zoning permit is what that is. Planning staff would review that. We'd make a recommendation. We're suggesting that the town manager be the one that make the decision. Of course, that's still fluid. The reason being is that if the zoning administrator makes the decision and it has to be appealed, then it would go to the Board of Zoning Appeals. I think that it would be better if the appeal process was handled by the Planning Commission and or the Town Council. So again, moving from left to right, town manager's decision. You've got yes, no. There's also the option for the town manager to refer it to the Planning Commission, but you can kind of see how it branches out from there. Ultimately, what we want to try to accomplish is a process where we're working with applicants to get to a yes, as long as they're able to. So yes, there will be some additional design standards, which may mean certain, redesigning a plan, but what we want to try to do is to guide them through that process so that the town manager can just say yes. If there is ever any question, then he can refer it to the Planning Commission, or if the decision is no, then it can go to the Town Council. So that's what this picture is. Now, what I'll also mention, you see the note up here, the bordered text there where it says for COA only. This process is just for the certificate of appropriateness. If they need to do a site plan, or if they need to do a conditional use permit or any other type of discretionary application, Those are separate. They still have to go through those processes. So this does not replace the site plan review process. This does not replace conditional use permits, so on and so forth. So touching on some of what John had said, again, major themes. We want to consider the effects of the regulations and the processes on the property owner. What I'm calling on this slide, the private interests. We want to allow people to keep improving and enjoying their property. But we have to balance that with the public interests as well, considering the cumulative and desired effects on the district and the site. So why are we here talking about this? We want to protect the Moat Museum and the vicinity of the Moat Museum from, we want to encourage more appropriate development in terms of scale, appearance, that kind of thing. And again, finally, I just want to reiterate that this is an overlay district, which means it is another set of regulations. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to you, Dr. Miller, because now we're at the slide where we talk about specific provisions. Right now I have commercial design standards up here, but if you want to start from the top, however you want to proceed with regards to looking at the language, I'll just go ahead and leave that up to at your discretion.
For the sake of, or, you know, my own maybe kind of sense of order, let's go through A, B, and again with the eye that we do need to really focus on some commercial structures. But if people have any questions or recommendations or thoughts or input or feedback for the earlier ones, let's go ahead and do that. I mean, A is, you know, we've already covered that. B, we've already covered that. C, it looks like you're suggesting, and again, I'm on page 1 of 5 on attachment B. So it looks like for that blank and C, you're suggesting that it should be the town manager, correct?
Yes, ultimately, you know, the town manager would make the decision. In reality, it's the community development staff that would be reviewing the application and then making a recommendation to the town manager. He's not going to stop what he's doing to review this kind of thing. He relies on us to do that. Okay. But ultimately, it would be his sign off on that. Where do we get this from? We actually have a couple of examples that were provided by Georgia State University that have an administrative process, so it's not something that we have concocted without having consulted some other examples. But one of the things that we liked about that was kind of the economy involved, where we don't have to pull more people in from the community to try to make a decision on hopefully something that is fairly simple. Now, there are some other situations where additional or more intense development may occur, or redevelopment in the case of the shopping center. This is where design guidelines would really help illustrate to an architect or an engineer or an applicant, say, hey, I'm thinking about doing something in the Mountain Gateway Overlay District. Can you give me a little bit more to go on besides just what's written in the ordinance? And that's what the design guidelines are supposed to do.
Good. We'll see those at a future meeting.
So what it says here in provision C is that the bodies involved may adopt design guidelines and staff would recommend at some point that design guidelines be adopted. They will not be adopted in parallel with this ordinance amendment, which we are trying to get done by November.
Right.
We will have to come back at some point later and compile those and write those and bring those to you, you know, basically as a separate item. There are a couple of different ways to proceed on that. Certainly, staff has the brain power to do that. We've got the knowledge, we've got the skills to do that. Do we have the time? We could probably make some time. It might not happen as fast as, say, if we hired an architectural consultant to do that, or a historic preservation consultant to do that, or someone who's got that, again, I'm not an architect, I'm a planner, and we're talking about design guidelines. So we can certainly pull from a lot of different examples that kind of make sense and could be applicable to the Farmville case, if you will, to the Moat Museum Gateway Overlay District. And I think that we could probably come up with something that makes sense, and we could do that, with some economy, again, not having to hire consultants. But again, those are the two ways that I would consider doing that. Is it possible that maybe instead of hiring a consultant, that we get some architectural students from University of Virginia or Virginia Tech or some other school with an architecture program to do this? That's also a possibility. But the point is, may adopt design guidelines. We are recommending that you do so, but it's not quote unquote required.
Right, okay. Other questions?
I have a question, and depending on the answer, a comment. So do I understand that the idea behind design guidelines is more visual, more graphic? This is what it should look like or could look like. Here are some examples. Is that the idea? It's not a wordy thing, it's a picture thing.
That is correct. It is more like what some people might call a pattern book or something like that.
Okay.
They are intended to visually guide and inspire design. So it's easy enough to write I say it's easy enough, but you can write design guideline, or rather design standards in a law or ordinance format, but it's a lot easier for someone to kind of look at a picture and say, oh, so this is what the words mean.
Picture's worth 1,000 words.
Picture is worth 1,000 words. The flip side of that is, and you'll hear me say this again, is that also words matter. So when we're writing ordinances, we want to make sure that we're doing that thoughtfully, and that we're doing that with a mind that people can understand that, and that we as the staff can also understand and explain that.
So based on that answer, my comment is, as well intended as this may be, I would just encourage staff to avoid confusion here, because subsection H has regulations, design regulations, subsection I has design standards, and this has design guidelines. And just in plain English, I think of guidelines as, well, you can do this, you don't have to do this, it's recommended, whereas regulations, you have to do this. And so, anyway, just maybe there's a way to glue all this together, so if you're reading this as an architect, as you suggested, or reading this as a property owner, they understand what they have to do versus what they can do in complying with the overlay district, so, to avoid confusion and to avoid appeals and avoid a lot of back and forth. Because again, there's, just to summarize, just the way it's drafted now, and I agree we shouldn't get into wordsmithing, but there are three sets of considerations swimming around here: design regulations, design standards, and maybe design guidelines.
I appreciate the lawyer's perspective.
Well, also a property owner, if I had to apply to do something, in this district, would I get it? Would I understand what I have to do versus what I could do?
So basically, what you're getting at is we could be more consistent in using that I guess attaching other words to the word design.
That or guideline, maybe another word is design graphics, or just something that makes it clear that seems to be an optional nature to the word guideline. And you made an excellent distinction that it's really, it's pictures, it's graphics. Is this what it could look like? Versus this is the, white and black letter of the regulations.
Good catch, good observation. Others, comments, thoughts, questions about section C?
I was just gonna add comment to the whiteboard scenario that you had in a previous slide. I mean, I would be supportive of the administrative process from planning staff to town manager. I like the notion of the option to refer to the planning commission. Is that in case of an appeal, or is that in case of an issue being large enough to where you want an additional set of eyes on it?
It's going to be the latter.
Okay. Us giving thought to the whiteboard scenario, does that then begin to help with filling in some of the blanks throughout?
I think so. This whiteboard scenario here is geared towards an administrative process that has the staff reviewing it for the town manager. So we would be advising the town manager, much like the planning commission advises the town council in making its decisions. I think that's probably an appropriate analogy.
Are people comfortable with that?
Yeah, I think this makes a lot of sense, this administrative process here for going through this. I agree, it doesn't make sense to have another review board of some sort put together, and this kind of looks to me like it takes good use of groups that we have in place already. So.
What I'll also mention, and this is just it's certainly applicable to this potential process, but it is also applicable to how we do business and community development. And I want to say this as many times as I can. You know, when I'm talking with applicants one-on-one, or I'm addressing the public here or whatever, I firmly believe in a transparent process. This isn't something that's going to happen where an applicant doesn't know how we arrived at a decision. An applicant will always know how we arrived at a decision. It's actually written further down, so if we're going to move on into provision D here, you can look at numbers 4 and 5. Following the blank's decision, the applicant shall be provided with a written statement of their findings and any conditions for undertaking the work. Same thing with number 5. If the application is disapproved, we have to provide reasons why we did that. During the review process, we also want to use checklists. So if we develop a checklist for certain things, then again, that would be made part of the case file.
Mr. Weiss?
Yeah, so tying 2 points together, back on Cam's questions, if the town manager, following your flow chart, does refer this to the planning commission, will that then trigger a public hearing process, or it would basically be administrative still, just within the planning commission? And maybe that's a question for another day, but just wondering, you know, if the town manager says, I want this to go to the planning commission, then does it become public hearing process? That's one question. And then the related question is, because you went on to section D, I have a question about item 2, which is the adjacent property owners. It says it shall not require a public hearing. The application of appropriateness shall not. But if the adjacent property owners do have questions, concerns, whatever, do they just go to staff with them? And staff addresses, is that the idea? It just stays administrative?
Yes, sir. This sort of mirrors another process in the zoning ordinance where we can modify certain things in the zoning ordinance. It's basically it's essentially an administrative variance is what it is. That's allowed by state code. That is authority that I do not intend to use very often. Administrative authority is something that I do want, that I do want to use very clearly and very transparently. But with that being said, that process specifically, which is again handed down from state law, says that we have to notify property owners and we have to give a comment period of 21 days. So something like that could be written here if we're going to do this administratively. Yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, well, let's go ahead and move on to D then. Any questions, observations, comments about section D? Anything else? Okay, then moving on to section E, certificate of appropriateness. I think one of the things that in our conversation that we had earlier, Mr. Pambit, you were very clear in emphasizing that this is not intended to micromanage anybody, especially and to differentiate between what's considered ordinary maintenance and kind of additional things. So in other words, like again, ordinary maintenance, if it doesn't have to go up before review. It's substantive changes. Other questions? I think that's an important distinction, in other words. Ms. Weiss?
I guess my main question on this, and I again, not to wordsmith, just a high level, is I know in some communities one of the favorite things to fight over in an overlay district is painting, and there is one mention of painting at the end of item 4 under E, but people will fight tooth and nail over it's the wrong shade of blue or something like this, and so again, in the spirit of not micromanaging this, I wondered if ordinary maintenance, for example, which has a lot of detail, is that repainting, or is somebody say, well, that wasn't the color back in the 1950s, and I think you know where I'm going with this. And that's just one that people may very, very innocently say, I'm just repainting, the paint was chipping. And some people, I think you understand the issue. And so I just wonder, it's just a very practical situation that will come up time and again.
So it is not our intent to get to that level of review when it comes to color palettes. What we say further on down in the attachment is, we certainly want to do things that are complementary to the Moat Museum. Let's not forget that this is about the Moat Museum and not about individual properties. We can certainly talk about massing and colors and materials and things of that sort later, but I think that if we want to try to avoid certain situations that would be not complementary to the architecture of the Mary E. Branch School or the Moat Museum, then maybe we do have certain prohibitions in there, like no day glow colors, something extreme like that. But we don't have, the staff isn't going to be holding up color swatches to say, hey, you painted this house the wrong color. That's not the intent here. This is not a historic district or I guess it is sort of an architectural district, but those types of distinctions can certainly be made in the, we can certainly prohibit day glow colors and extreme colors like that, but make other recommendations in the design standard or the design guidelines or the pattern book, whatever term that we use to distinguish it from the regulations themselves.
I had thought about that too, and I think that's one of the reasons I do support an administrative review process, because a lot of those conflicts that you read about or heard from family members elsewhere are a consequence of architectural review boards who people are sticklers about certain things, and so I think someone has a big kind of picture in mind. And the other thing too is in that, what you referenced, Lee, down in H, section H, wait, no, excuse me, it's section I1D. Use exterior materials, architectural features, and colors that are complementary to those found in the neighborhood, particularly those of Robert Russo Moat Museum. I mean, that neighborhood in the district is so diverse already. I mean, except for like a Dago color, I think you're going to find something, whatever a property owner picks, it's going to be complementary to what's already there. So I thought that was kind of a check to maybe prevent that conflict, but I did think about that too.
Lee, can you also explain the intent behind the last part of item 5, back on E5, this concept of a bona fide offer to sell? Because that seems to be kind of this, and it comes up in a few places, this seems to be a carve-out to following all these other rules. So can you help us understand that part of it?
That's something that I'm still trying to get my arms around as well. In the model ordinance, this came from a model ordinance, and we heavily tweaked and took a lot of stuff out of the model ordinance to reduce the amount of regulation. I left this in. I'm not a big fan of this provision. I think that it complicates certain things, but I wanted to leave that in there as a point of discussion. I think that maybe we put a bookmark on that one or pin on that one, and we try to gain a level of understanding where we can discuss it a little bit more. But further on in the in section G, where it actually talks about time schedules and certain amounts, that's why that subsection G3C is in red. I am actually I'm this close to recommending that we don't even touch that one, but I wanted to leave that one in there to show you and to illustrate, what some of the other localities are considering doing. I think this is a pretty complicated thing that we probably just want to,
My thought, I really don't see the benefit of E5.
Yeah, and my concern with that, again, maybe I don't understand it, so if I understood it better, I wouldn't be concerned, but it seems like this bona fide offer to sell concept is just a big carve-out from having to comply with the certificate of appropriateness in the first place, the way it's written. That's how you read it too? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think given the heavy amount of commercial property in the buffer, that could potentially become something that folks try to use as a workaround.
Well, okay, so let's jump ahead. If this is something we want to discuss more or make a recommendation on, does anyone have any thoughts on F? And then we can go ahead and get to G, where we have the appeals, that this is discussed more, and we can kind of talk about it more.
I will mention under F subsection 1 subsection C, where we talk about the Secretary of the Interior's standards for the rehabilitation of historic properties. There are not going to be but 2 historic properties in that district, and that they're, one is the Mary Branch School probably, and then the other one is going to be the Moat Museum itself. So I think that if we're going to, if we're going to delve into the realm of design standards and that kind of thing, we still make that a consideration, but if there are certain properties that we do want this to apply to, I guess we can kind of defer that conversation about the Secretary of the Interior standards, but that also came in the model in the model ordinance.
I mean, the historic properties are gonna naturally have to comply. I mean, any time the museum seeks to do a substantive upgrade, there's usually a Virginia Department of Historic Resources and a National Park Service component in terms of sign-off. I would imagine the same for Mary E. Branch, considering some of the designations they might seek to achieve in the future and some of the funding sources that they might seek to go after. I don't know if it's something that I would place on the remaining properties in the
And-
buffer. I don't know if it's necessary.
Right, and now that I've had a couple of seconds to think about it, this is something that you would apply to structures that are within a designated federal district or national historic, register of historic places, which the only structures that are going to be on that are, well, definitely the Moat Museum, but I don't know if the Mary E. Branch School is a designated historic site on either the state or the federal register, but,
I do believe certainly on the state.
right. But I agree with you, Cam, that most of the other structures in that, in the boundaries that we have come up with are not on some sort of register.
So those are going to be regulated or maybe just guidelined by the design standards that will be forthcoming. Okay. So maybe there needs to be, some stipulation there that when you talk about for the treatment of historic properties, that be identified as either on the state register or the national register or both. Just for the clarity, so, the Burger King folks know they don't have to make the Whoppers even more delicious.
A related point, just to clarify, Virginia doesn't have a Department of Interior. It's not called that, at least. I presume this is a reference to federal, or is this meant to be the state, or both?
Well, the State Historic Preservation Office is actually the Department of Historic Resources. And they are going to follow those federal standards.
Good conversation. Other observations, questions about F? Not F. Okay, then let's go to G then. And do we want to jump down to to what people feel might be a carve out or this demolition of the building? Or do people have questions about 1 through?
C confuses me with the 3C.
3C?
Yeah, I do question if it's necessary to delve into that.
I think to just simplify the whole conversation about subsection 3 here, that we would actually strike everything after the phrase arbitrary and capricious. That really talks about, anything after that is going to talk about bona fide offers and amounts and times of that, wording and phrasing about times and that kind of thing. So really, in addition to the right of appeal, a property owner shall have the right to demolish a building or structure provided that. So everything after that would be deleted, all the way down to including A, B, C, and D. So really, all that would be left is everything from a decision all the way down to arbitrary and capricious. That would, just looking at it and discussing it with you, would be my recommendation.
I'm certainly good with that big deletion. I don't mind telling everyone I wrote 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 question marks on the part you just said delete. So that would solve 6 of my question marks.
Other comments about 3? Mr. Bramley, can you kind of elaborate on what the intent or purpose or like of 4 would be, G4? the town council may acquire in any legal manner in a historic area.
I would characterize that clause as a reiteration of a power that we all know local governments have already, which is the ability to acquire property and to sell property. I have not looked in the charter, but I am almost certain that that power is in the town charter. So why would we need to say that again, here? I think that would be a good candidate for deletion as well.
Yeah, I just worry that that might be misinterpreted as, the town is looking to, how do people feel about that, deleting that?
It makes sense to me to delete it because I don't think, to Lee's point, I don't think it adds anything that the town didn't already have the power to do, most likely. And one of the phrases I kind of chuckled at was in any legal manner, as opposed to any illegal manner. I mean, again, the town isn't.
And what I think it does too is it lessens the confusion that the town is seeking to buy Moat or Mary E. Branch.
So it sounds to me that Section G has gotten considerably shorter, but as we go through and look at what's left, making sure that we still have a robust appeal process, that's how staff is going to approach this after tonight's meeting.
And I think that's the important thing, kind of back to some of the points on one of the earlier slides, to make it very clear and transparent to people. Okay. Other questions or observations, comments about G? G. Okay, moving on to H, this district design regulations or some other noun that might be forthcoming. Do people have questions about what is supposed to be submitted for the certificate of appropriateness?
No, this one seemed clear to me.
Others?
Sorry I haven't spoken up with other ones, but you guys are covering all the stuff that I was thinking.
That's good. That's good. We're all paying attention to the same things, or similar things. Moving on to I then. Again, the following design standards, or maybe another word to come in the future, shall apply. Did anyone have any thoughts, questions, observations, recommendations about these criteria?
At the risk, Mr. Chairman, of seeming like I'm identifying a nit, I wondered if there was a purpose behind the word choice in C of houses versus buildings, structures, whatever other word could be used there. Was there, Lee, a reason to basically identify houses versus any other structure that may be in the district? Maybe it should be structures, but I'm just wondering if it really is meant to be just houses.
Going back to the original language of the model, what this is a synthesis of a historic district and what they called a neighborhood conservation district. To me, what we're trying to accomplish here is more neighborhood conservation as opposed to historic preservation. So, so there was a lot of words that got transferred over, and neighborhood conservation district, as it was stated, again, as I mentioned to you, Dr. Miller, the source of a lot of this language was from the South Boston zoning ordinance. So it is a town of similar size and composition in many ways to Farmville, and staff certainly felt comfortable taking what they had and tweaking it for our purposes, and that I would say is a remnant of the quote-unquote neighborhood conservation district language. So if I've circled that here, and as we move forward during our review on the staff side, maybe we look at, you know, a more appropriate word, or seeing if this is also sufficient for the commercial, for commercial design standards, which I would suggest that we probably need a little bit more for commercial, but a lot of the same design elements are, you're gonna wanna pay attention to those, whether they're residential or commercial. Massing, building materials and colors, fenestration, those kinds of things. Of course, we always wanna use the Moat Museum, and I would also suggest that the Mary E. Branch School would be used as inspirations for design as people are moving forward with new construction specifically, but then also for, you know, maybe there might be some commercial rehabilitation on some of the sites in that district. So, point well taken on the houses, and we'll take a look at that.
I think this may, if I could suggest, I believe it would be helpful to help clean this up and make it as clear and concise as possible, especially in this whole section, if there were regulations that applied to all businesses and residential zone, and then it were split out. This is specific to residential, this is specific to business. And I think that would clear that up without having to pick and choose words either. That would be the whole section, and then going into the last part that we wanted to talk about with business district.
Ms. Johnson, do you have?
No, I just agree. I agree with that. And the thing that keeps coming to my mind as we're going through all this is that, you know, while the immediate thing is we want to be able to get museum in the, you know, as an overlay, or get the overlay district done and taken care of. But, you know, we're also charged with looking forward to the future. And, you know, we don't know what might happen with some of those buildings that are in this district. So I think there does need to be the guidelines, you know, whether it's business or, you know, or residential.
So what I'm hearing is that people imagine it would be convenient for applicants to have just an overall set of universally applicable kind of guidelines, and then like a separate section for residential, separate section for commercial?
I think it would be helpful, at least in this latter section.
Right.
Yeah.
Is that plausible, Mr. Memby?
We can see what we can do about that. I understand what you're saying, Jerry, and again, when we go all the way down to 8, which I really feel like I've got some suggestions for that, but there may be a way that we write so 1 through 7, in such a way that it would be applicable to all residences, and commercial development would have an additional set of standards that they would have to comply with. What I don't want to do is to get painted in a corner where we're trying to apply the same, you know, potentially applying the same standards to both. And I know that's not what the intent is with your remark, but that's something that we would have to carefully consider.
All right, then let's go ahead and then jump to 8. Were there specific questions you wanted us to think about and provide some feedback on?
I'm putting a slide up on the screen about specific provisions for commercial design standards. So, John, you and I talked a little bit about this today, and I mentioned earlier that the shopping center has a a significant presence in the district, in the proposed district. And to Jane's point, that this overlay district is a long play. You know, this is not going to dramatically change the properties in that boundary overnight. This is going to be an incremental process, and you have to keep this in place for the duration in order for it to do any good. Once you set it, it doesn't do a whole lot of good to tinker with it or remove it if you haven't accomplished what you need to accomplish. The long play also is you also have to be careful where if you tinker with it, then are you also tinkering with the potential designation of the, and of course we all hope that the Moat Museum achieves the World Heritage Site designation. We don't want to tinker with that in such a way that it jeopardizes that designation. We want that designation, we need that designation. This piece right here is one of the things that we absolutely need in order to do that. So it's my understanding that that shopping center was just rehabilitated and renovated. It may be another 20 years before they decide it needs to be updated again. But bullet point number one, commercial structures are future opportunities to positively contribute to the vicinity. You know, you've got the standard Burger King architecture across the street. I think that the UVA Dialysis Center and the Centra Health Center has done a good job of kind of looking forward to that. They might have done so unintentionally, but they're using brick veneer, and they're using, while it is kind of a modern looking addition or that end of the shopping center, they are using building materials that we could kind of interpret are compatible with the Moat Museum. You know, I mentioned the brick veneer to John earlier. The CVS is composed exclusively of what they call split face concrete masonry units, or CMU. So when we have site plans come in and you're reviewing them, I will refer to CMU, that's concrete masonry unit. There's smooth face and there's split face. When they come in and they redevelop that, we would probably suggest that they use a brick veneer. I'm not asking them to build the building out of brick. I'm just asking them to put a brick veneer on it. You know, that's kind of how I see that playing out in order to positively contribute to the district. So again, to the second bullet point, design should be informed and inspired by neighborhood character and the two primary historic sites. So we talked about the composition, at least from a residential standpoint. It's a varied, but fortunately, you're not going to see any day glow colors there. So I think that would be kind of an easy choice for staff to say, no, you're not painting it that color. Or, there may be some, wood siding or, something to that effect. We want to take a look at what's around that, and we want to build off of that, is basically what that second bullet point is about. From a commercial design standpoint, we do want to pay attention to we want to pay stricter attention to the building materials and the colors. Fenestration is just a fancy word for doors and windows. So we want to take a look at what the Moat Museum has, what might be architecturally appropriate in that district. Height and mass are certainly things, so we don't want any large buildings overpowering the historic sites, the sites that we're trying to protect. So when we take a stab at writing some of these commercial standards, for instance, in the R1 and R3 districts, the maximum height, I believe, is 35 feet. Well, that's still pretty tall, but then when you get into the business districts, maximum height could be 45 feet. Maybe we need to tone that down when we specify commercial design standards. Signage, of course, we're talking right now about B2 and B3 signage. My first impression is that what we have proposed would not have a negative effect on the Moat Museum. we can certainly analyze that a little bit more. And then some other features. We would take, we would have to take a look at the Moat Museum and say, you know, if you're going to build this Wendy's here, or if you're going to build this whatever here, then we want you to take a look at the Moat Museum and get your inspiration for your building's design from that, or from the Mary Branch School.
So what do you need from us at this moment? Is just kind of concurrence on this is what we need to be doing, or you want some, or additional ideas, or?
Yeah, you know, some additional ideas. I think that if you've got examples from other localities of what you would want to see in a commercial design, and of course we're primarily. Let me go back to the zoning map. So take a note of the blue line, which is the proposed district, and everything that is purple is zoned commercial. In the southwest corner of the district, the proposed district is essentially the shopping center. You'll also note, as kind of a curiosity, the Moat Museum site is actually zoned B2. Properties across the street, the Mary Branch School is zoned B2. You also have the Burger King. Now, you also have a couple of residences from Sanford down that are zoned B2. So there may be some potential future business development. I'm not saying that we have inquiries on this, but because it's zoned B2, the potential exists for someone to buy those properties and say, hey, I want to do, you know, a little retail strip or something. When they bring that plan in, we want those design standards to be in place to be compatible. Is there something, and getting back to your original question, Dr. Miller, is there something specific that you, as commissioners, would like us to put into the language? Let me fast forward back to this slide here. I didn't offer a lot of specifics, but I did have some things for everybody to consider. Building materials, colors, fenestration. You know, do we want to limit the height to maybe half of what might be allowed in the B1? I think that another dynamic or another element that's at play here is the university. So the university technically isn't subject to local zoning laws. Now, last month I mentioned, and Georgia State had also recommended, that the university and the town enter into a memorandum of understanding and agreement about the Moat Museum. We don't have language for that yet. That's not something that would be part of this ordinance or this amendment, but that is a Georgia State University recommendation, and I think that we need to take that to heart. So, you know, you've got a couple of structures on that same side of the street further down with the two dorms that are, I believe that those dorms are 130 feet tall. The future, the campus master plan doesn't show anything for that end of the campus, but you know, these are the things that we would want to consider. Do we not want to see that kind of thing right next to the Moat Museum? I have every faith that that Longwood would not do that, but let's put that in the context of a private developer who is looking at the bulk regulations for B2, where the maximum height is 45 feet. The true hotel, I believe, is 55 feet tall. So take that, subtract it by 10, and you still have a pretty massive, you know, a potential for a building that is out of scale. So let me introduce another concept here, another design concept here. That neighborhood is
Can I pause? I'm sorry.
yeah.
I mean, like, is that something we want to, I mean, Abby, you reacted to that, and I'm sorry for interrupting, but while we're talking about height, what do people want to think, what do people think about that?
Yeah, I would say that it seems to me that it would be appropriate to at least give some type of indication in there, say it's 2/3, maybe not half. But then if Longwood or somebody else were looking at it, at least they know that there's the desire here in the outline of the plan to reduce the height so that they could try and follow suit with it, even if they don't necessarily by the state have to. That would be my opinion on it.
Yeah, and I do agree that a memorandum of understanding with the university would definitely be important. I mean, right now, things are probably, I wouldn't imagine Longwood doing anything that would go against this right now, but administrations change. Things change at that university, so you never know who the next president might want to do or what else. So I think that's important.
I agree. I think that, Longwood's campus is only so big anyway. So as development, redevelopment occurs, the different forces may bear on this. The memorandum of understanding may not be binding per se, but at least it's strong guidance and advice on how things should happen. And it's certainly better than not having it.
So with that being said, one of the other concepts that I kind of wanted to bring to the forefront is the concept of scale, and more specifically, this neighborhood is of a human scale. So as opposed to the dorms, which are of a monumental scale, very large buildings, very massive. They're intended to inspire awe. That's kind of how Washington D.C. was designed. It was not designed at a human scale, but this is a small town neighborhood. We want it to have lower buildings if we do want to protect the site. So that's something that the staff will be looking into in terms of height, massing, volume, and scale.
I would say the height consideration would be an important one. Just for my reference, what would the dialysis in Centra Medical be height-wise? Just best guesstimate.
I'm going to take a guess and say that's probably about between 25 and 30 feet.
I'll just add one thing, looping back a little bit to the paint. I'll just use that as an example. I would rather see a few things, not a lot. I'm not a big fan of a lot of regulation. I think this is a unique thing going on here, but I would rather see in the standards prohibit specific things. I'd rather see that than people guess at what you're after there. I'm not talking about a long list, but I would like to see 5 or 6 things that are just prohibited. It's no question what people are after there or what we're after if a business engineer or architect were looking at it to understand what the desire is there. So I would suggest having at least a few that are prohibited.
Recommendation you said you want us to think about?
I think that the staff has what it needs in order to proceed at least with the commercial standards, commercial design requirements. I'll go ahead and wrap up with a couple of slides, and of course, the Planning Commission can ask any questions that it needs to at any time. But again, getting into the specific provisions, we've already gone through the list from beginning to end, which I think was a lengthy but necessary exercise, and hopefully that will make the conversation a little bit more, informed and more efficient next time. But I just want to leave you with a couple of things. This slide about specific provisions, what else should we consider with regards to these three items: process, designs, and the effects of each? Again, when I go back to the public and the private interests, Dr. Miller framed the conversation at the very beginning. We want to consider the effects of what we're doing here on the private interests, and what are the public interests being served here. I think that the public interest statement, you don't need to look any further than provision A, which is the intent of the district. This is why we're doing this. But also to make sure that we're doing what we can from the town perspective to assist the World Heritage effort. So getting back here, as you are thinking about this, making notes, certainly come back to the staff as you are looking at other considerations. And just as a fair warning, we're going to be asking this question or these questions again next month. Every chance that we get, we'll probably ask these questions on September 8th. Let me go forward to the schedule here, which was in your staff report. It's just a exact copy and paste of where we are today on August the 17th and where we hope to be on Wednesday, November 9th. Hopefully we have something that everyone can agree on and approve, but we've got several planning commission meetings. We've got several council meetings, which we hope the council will take a lot of these comments under advisement. Each one of these meetings is an opportunity for us to ask these questions here. So with that being said, again, this is the schedule. And we are specifically talking about Moat Museum. I'm just going to turn it back over to you, Dr. Miller, and see if there are any questions about this or anything else that we've talked about so far tonight.
Yeah.
I have a question. I think this is probably more for Cam, but I was just thinking about it. And does what we put together for the overlay district, do the details of this become part of the application? Does that get looked at for the World Heritage Site application, or is it just that we have it?
So it will become a part of the application process, and it will be a part of the totality of what they will consider. Just keeping in mind that this is a joint serial nomination, so they'll be considering the components of the other communities and what they're submitting as well. So, I do think, just getting back to some earlier comments, I think the way we go about this, nothing in life is guaranteed as it relates to the World Heritage process. So I think, ultimately we want to build something that is beneficial, even if that process didn't make it to the end, because there's a lot of hills to still climb. This is an important part to it, but additional hills nonetheless. So, I think that's an important consideration as well.
I'll add to that. I mean, even if it doesn't make it, and again, I've said this a few times already, but it's worth keeping in mind. I mean, this is part of our comprehensive plan. And you had talked about entrance overlays, and this is one of the ones that was imagined. And so, you're right. I guess the timing of the World Heritage Site is precipitating it, doing it sooner rather than kind of down the road. But it kind of fits with what the community and council had. And what we had desired and recommended. Questions about the timeline? Again, if possible, on Thursday, September 8th at Moat at 6 p.m. Welcome y'all's attendance to hear what people say and ask questions and answer them.
I have one question about a topic that we haven't discussed, but I've seen this elsewhere, is does the World Heritage Society or anyone else involved in all of this require any sort of special signage? Like you're now entering the Moton overlay, the Moton district or whatever. Is there some sort of, coming from either direction, because this is a main drag, you know, that up and down, you know, north-south, is there going to be a requirement to have some sort of signage about this? Or maybe the town wants to put signage anyway because it's, you know, if it happens, it's kind of a distinctive, unique thing. So
they would let communities determine that based on, you know, what fits best with their sign design standards. One thing that we will do as part of this process is we would have a joint management plan that involves all of the sites participating in the joint serial nomination. And so through that management plan, we would offer some recommendations on how we could jointly market this within our communities. But they will leave that ultimate decision up to the localities. And so I could envision that maybe, you know, as town and museum consider their individual strategic planning efforts, that this would be an important part of something that you would have to do, and, you know, probably would even have to involve county tourism as well.
Other questions, observations? Well, our next item of business on the new business is any staff items, Mr. Panman, that we haven't already covered?
Right. A couple of things really quickly, given the late hour. Staff well, you're going to have to meet on Wednesday, September 21st as part of the timeline for the Moat Museum. Again, you're going to discuss that a little bit more. By that point, there will have been a community engagement session, again, September 8th at 6 o'clock at the Moat Museum. And we will most likely have a conditional use permit application for you to hear. We have not received the application. We've received an extensive narrative on that, and the applicant, the potential applicant, has asked me if he's on the agenda. My response is, as soon as you fill out an application and give me $500, we'll put you on the agenda. So I know that he's good for it. So expect further details on your preliminary agenda. One of the other things that I wanted to do was to welcome the Longwood students back. We had the opportunity to meet with 3 of the honor students. They were just roaming the halls of Town Hall, and I asked them if there was something that we could help them with. They explained to me what they were doing, and it actually turned out to be a pretty decent hour or so that we spent with them. So I wanted to put that word in. Welcome to the Longwood students, and I know that they're moving in. John, any other word from a professor's standpoint?
Do your homework.
We had 289 students arrive today. We've got, 1,500 left to arrive over the next few days. So freshmen move in, or first year move in today and tomorrow. Returners Friday and Saturday.
So downtown's all set for booming business after this weekend, right?
Yeah, we'll stay away from Walmart this weekend if we mind. But thank you, seriously, thank you very much for taking the time to meet with them and to make them feel welcome and get them involved in the town. That's great. I appreciate that.
And as I mentioned in my email earlier, those kinds of opportunities are few and far between for us to interact directly with the students. But again, The concept of town-gown relations is really important, especially in a small town like this. So, so we really enjoyed our time with the students. It was serendipitous. It was completely unexpected, but you know, Michelle and I were basically on duty at the time, and they walked in, and we were very much interested in their assignment. I think that it would have been fine enough to tour them through the police department, let them look at a police car, something like that. But they always get all the glory. The police department, the fire department, because they have all the cool toys, right? So we actually sat them down in community development and explained to them a little bit about what our agency is. Again, just to reiterate, community development here in Farmville is a development and transportation agency. On our dry erase board, we have a list of things that we try to keep tabs on, and they were asking questions about some of the things that we, as a department, try to remind ourselves that we need to accomplish. They don't have timeframes associated with them, but you know, when we go back there and we have our team meetings, we try to remind each other, hey, where are you with this, or where are you with that? And they were asking questions about that. So I felt like that them taking an interest in what we do, it was a bright spot in our day. And we would love to have more interactions like that, not just with the students, but with the staff and professors and administration. So we certainly want to keep that line of communication open and explore any other possibilities for something like that. Maybe they come to a planning commission meeting. Maybe we give them a tour or whatever. But you know, stuff like that. You got to turn your mics on and do that.
Great, well, thank you again. The last commission item, back at in our organizational meeting back in January, it was suggested that we try to get together with other bodies, you know, in the town or county. I just want to let you all know, and, you know, thank you to this to Lee, reached out to Pam Butler, who's chair of the BZA, and said, hey, you know, would you all be interested in just kind of getting together and talking about our, you know, our roles and how they complement each other, and if the possibility exists for some, you know, mutually useful training, we'll do that. And then also looking at doing that with the county as well. So that's down the road. We got, you know, kind of figure out schedules and workloads, but just want to let you know I'm following up on that and see what we can do. Other questions? Other thoughts? Observations? Do I hear if there's no further business, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second tie. It's a tie.
Mr. Patterson has moved that we adjourn the meeting. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Mr. Weiss has seconded the motion to adjourn. By voice acclamation, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.